leaders need to feel this burden? What would be the source or sources of this deficit of encouragement in the workplace?
If you're a leader, you've got influence over someone else's life. It is your duty to help that person feel valued and seen and really understand their gifts and who God made them to be. Ken, I was overexposed and I was underdeveloped. And sometimes God's preparation for your life is packaged as pain. I don't know where today finds you. Might be dark. You're not buried, you're planted. God can make beautiful things out of rough situations.
A moment of encouragement, Jordan, could literally change the trajectory of somebody's life.
95% of our successes or failures in life are a direct result of the people we habitually associate with.
That's it right there. Hello, folks. I'm excited to share a conversation I had with Jordan Montgomery, a leadership expert. He coaches CEOs on how to build great cultures and how to lead well. His newest book is called The Art of Encouragement, and we do a deep dive on this underutilized skill. Check it out. Okay, so how would you define encouragement? Because I think encouragement, Jordan, is a word that we can all use in a sentence. So this is not difficult stuff. However, you are an encourager. We're going to do a deep dive. We're going to play in the sandbox here of encouragement. We're going to look at some data. We're going to look at how to do it. We're going to look at what it does. We're going to really have some fun here. But I think it would be interesting to hear your definition, not the dictionary definition, but how do you define encouragement? What's it look like, sound like, smell like?
Real simply, Ken, I think it is about depositing belief, transferring energy, and giving somebody a bigger picture view of what their life could look like. And so that's what it's meant to me over the years. And part of the reason we wrote this book is I've just been the direct beneficiary of folks who've done that for me. Mm-hmm. They gave me a bigger picture view of what my life could look like. They deposited belief. Zig Ziglar said, oftentimes people need somebody to believe in them before they'll believe in themselves. And then I think so much of it is also about a transfer of energy, right? It's like, I want to give you something that may not be so much oriented around just words, but like, I want to give you a feeling. Maya Angelou famously said, people don't always remember what you said or what you did, but they do remember the way that you made them feel. And so I've had people just do that for me, all three of those things.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. I love it. I think that's a great jumping off point. Here's some data straight out of the workforce. Okay. This is new data, 2024. This is where we stand. And this is a great conversation for our audience, of those of you that are leading and those of you that are trying to influence your leader. You're trying to figure out, hey, am I in the right place with the leadership in my organization? Or do I need to change to a different bus? 83% of employees feel that recognition affects their motivation at work. So now this is really interesting. Your first reaction to that?
Yeah, I think it's spot on with all the research and study that we've done. Harvard Business Review just released an article recently, Ken, that 79% of recent college graduates cited the number one reason for leaving a job within their first year of taking employment was a lack of, not encouragement, but closely tied to encouragement would be appreciation.
Right.
And I think this speaks to the human spirit. You know, socially and psychologically, our most important and most basic human need is the need to be known and the need to feel valued.
Yeah.
So no surprise to me that people today are feeling a lack of recognition, a lack of appreciation in the workforce, because as leaders, we too often assume that we know how our people are feeling.
Yeah.
And often our feelings are misguided. And so all of what you just shared signs off is spot on with the research that we've done on our own accord.
Yeah. Well, I'm tying this to encouragement because I think if you are encouraging someone, they feel seen, they feel valued. And so this is all very closely aligned. Would you agree that the act of encouragement makes people feel seen, heard, and valued?
I would absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Our mutual friend, thought leader, Pastor Craig Rochelle, he said, 4 of the most important words in leadership are, I notice you matter.
Yeah.
I notice you matter. So people want to feel seen. They want to feel heard, understood, and valued. And that's why we wrote the book. And it's why I'm fortunate we get to have this conversation today, is want to help people allow other people to feel that way.
Yeah, I think it's a secret weapon to leadership because it is something that's so rarely used that if we were to think of it for the moment that we're having this conversation as a weapon, we pull it off the shelf and we use it, it's vital. Some more data, 71% of employees say they'd be less likely to leave their organization. So just a flip side to the data you just shared. It's just another way of looking at it. Less likely to leave if they were recognized more frequently. And just this idea of walking around and recognizing people and speaking in. I love the way that you defined it, depositing belief and transferring energy. But this is not, I know you, so this is not mamby-pamby, kumbaya, deep as a thimble, kind of soft, flowery words, correct? This is something far more intentional.
Well, there's a reason we entitled this book The Art of Encouragement. The new book releases in July, and people keep asking me, okay, how'd you come up with the title? Why is it called The Art of Encouragement? The reason we titled it The Art of Encouragement is because encouragement is just that. It's an art. It's a science. There's more to it than just kumbaya. You're the best. You're awesome. Way to go. You did a good job. I think there's really a science to this. I think if we want to be world-class at encouraging people, just like, Ken, you are world-class at interviewing people. I mean, you're one of the best on the planet, period. End of sentence, at interviewing people. You have worked at it. It's an art form. You are prepared. You've spent thousands of hours on your craft. Okay, well, same thing here. If you want to be world-class at encouraging people, at making others feel seen, valued, understood, and known, then you got to work at it. And you have to understand the art and the science. So like what you just described is the last chapter in the new book, The Art of Encouragement, is the art of authentic encouragement. And we wrote this chapter because we believe and we feel that so much of our world is guilty of kumbaya. Mm-hmm. Way to go. Nice job. Well done. And we think that because we uttered those words, that's sufficient and people should feel valued. I had a really interesting experience. Ken, I was young. I was a young whippersnapper, early 20s. And I had an amazing conversation with a business coach. His name's Bob Tykert. Bob Tykert is hard-nosed, East Coast, old school. I walked into his office and I was, it's kind of an honorary session with Bob. I had a mentor actually pay for the session. He said, go talk to Bob. He's the best. And I walk into Bob's office. I said, Bob, so nice to meet you. I've heard amazing things about you. Bob says, that's great. Like what? And I said, well, I mean, just a bunch of great things. I mean, I've just heard amazing things, and he said, well, that's great to hear. Like what? And we sat down and I'm starting to feel, pretty insecure, starting to sweat. Mm-hmm. Bob puts his hand on the table. He looks at me. He says, Jordan, you know what? I think you're full of it. I think you have an authenticity problem. And I'd like to help you with that.
Wow.
I remember on that day, Ken, thinking, I'm never going to feel this way again. Yeah. If I have something to say to someone, I'm going to make sure that there's substance behind it. Yeah. And as leaders, I think that's just a microcosm of so often the world that we live in, where we want to communicate and connect with the world around us without substance. And because of that, we lack authenticity and we're not effective with people. So I've had that experience. Probably everybody listening has had that experience. We know when someone's being real and when someone's being kumbaya with their encouragement.
I think there's a massive deficit in the workplace as it relates to leaders and also coworkers. And we're going to come at it from a coworker standpoint too. I got some data on that I can't wait to share with you. But first and foremost, why do you think, or what would be the source or sources of this deficit of encouragement in the workplace? It makes sense to everybody. It's not rocket science, and yet the data shows that it's not happening. Why?
Two reasons. Number one, we tend to overestimate our own ability to connect and communicate. I think that's true for almost all of us. Mm-hmm. I'm guilty, Ken. I overestimate how good I am at connecting and communicating with the world around me. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason I do that is because I live with me every day. Mm-hmm. And so I'm thinking about showing love and expressing love the way that I want to receive love, or expressing support or appreciation the way that I want to receive support and appreciation. We're all a little bit guilty of that, right? So then we walk around just kind of overestimating, assuming that other people are like us. And the number two, the reason we overestimate is because we assume we make too many assumptions that we know how people are feeling. Our mutual friend, John Maxwell, said one of the most important questions in leadership is, what am I missing? I need to always assume that I am missing something. So if you're a leader listening in on this show, you're in a team meeting, you're in a one-on-one meeting, you're meeting with a colleague, a client, a friend, you should be asking the question, what am I missing? Mm-hmm. Hey, before we wrap up our conversation today, anything I'm missing, anything that I didn't see, anything that I think, where you think I need to know more about, I'd love to better understand what I'm missing. And I always want to assume that I'm missing something. I think if we made fewer assumptions, and I think if we took time to really evaluate our own communication and how we connect with the world around us, we would be better at the art of encouragement. And I think as such, retention would go up and we'd have a better workplace culture.
Yeah. I think those are two very, very good observations. And I completely agree. I think there's something else going on. I've always said this about myself, just in my own personal journaling and thought life and just reflection. And I always could tell when I am not giving what I need to give, whatever my role is, husband, father, teammate, brother, son, whatever. And it's usually, Jordan, when I'm trying to give something I don't have and I'm trying to gut it out. I'm going to throw something out at you and I want you to take it. I think that another reason why there's this big deficit is because we have a bunch of discouraged leaders.
Yes.
You can't give what you don't have. You just can't. You can't encourage other people when you're walking around in desperate need of encouragement. So this really starts at the top. And you actually write about this in the book. You talk about one of the art forms here is the art of self-encouragement. But I want to throw all that to you and just say, all right, first, your thoughts on we've got a bunch of discouraged leaders and they can't give what they don't have. And then secondly, if you're discouraged, how does one self-encourage?
These are awesome questions, Ken, and such an important topic. And you're right. I think we have a discouraged group of leaders. I think we live in an all too often negative world. Mm-hmm. The media can be negative. Leaders can be negative. I can be negative. John Gordon said, I'm not positive because life is easy. I'm positive because life is difficult. There are people listening today who are dealing with really difficult circumstance. Mm-hmm. I don't want to minimize that. I don't know what you're going through, but you are probably dealing with something that is very difficult. And because of that, you could find life to be, or your work to be, or your relationships to be discouraging. Mm-hmm. I believe the source of true encouragement, true hope, true inspiration is God's word. I really believe that, Ken. I think you also probably believe that to be true. Okay. Now, some people listening know God's word. Some people don't. If you don't know God's word, I'd invite you to it. I think there's a lot of hope and inspiration, also a lot of truth inside that book. Mm-hmm. From a practical standpoint, I would say this: the words that come out of your mouth, the book of Proverbs says the tongue can bring either life or death. The words that come out of your mouth, I think, are the first step toward self-encouragement. Mm-hmm. You're not always in control of what you think. If you're like me, you probably have some crazy thoughts, but you are in control of what you say. And ironically, what you say drives a lot of how you think. So I think for listeners to know that, hey, I am in control of what I say. I am in control of the narrative. When I externalize a thought, it becomes 10 times more powerful than I just left it if I left it in my own brain. There's a great book written called It Takes What It Takes by the late Trevor Moawad. He unpacks the power of externalization. I would encourage our readers to go to that book, check it out. The second thing is environment. I want to get myself around other people, Ken, like you. You and I shared a conversation this past year. I was feeling discouraged. Yeah. We're on our way to the airport. I laid some thoughts at your feet. I just sort of shared my heart with you. And you said, hey, Jordan, here's a couple ways to think about this. Here's a couple things you should do. Here's a couple things that you need to just sort of sit on and sit with and maybe even pray over. Mm. And I remember getting out of that van with you and thinking, we're in a little Uber, van to the airport. Yeah. And I remember thinking, I feel different. Ken helped me think about that situation or problem in a different way. Mm-hmm. So your environmental game drives your mental game. Your mental game then drives so much of your life, but it's the environment and it's the narrative that controls so much of how we feel about us. But I don't want to talk about the topic without addressing true hope and inspiration, which is, I believe, Ken, God's word. I believe your circumstances can be pretty poor, and your hope can still be great.
Yeah.
Because my hope isn't in, these positive words or my buddy Ken and what he has to say to me. My hope is in God's truth and God's word and, what I know to be true about his plans for my life. And so if you don't know God's word, go check it out. It's one of the most encouraging books I think you could ever read.
Why is it that we don't teach encouragement? Why isn't it this just such a no-brainer? I mean, it's back to this is a real problem. 49% of employees get feedback daily or weekly. So the other 51% are receiving recognition monthly, quarterly, or yearly. This is striking to me. Again, why hasn't this been more of an institutionalized situation? Because I think we all get it. We all want that attaboy, attagirl. Thoughts on this?
At the end of the day, encouragement is more of a choice than a style.
Yeah.
Ken, I think, unfortunately, leaders view encouragement as a style. It's like, I'm an encouraging leader or I'm not an encouraging leader. Or that's my style or that's not my style. I teach this to a lot of men, middle-aged men, veteran, seasoned leaders. I love talking to people in the baby boomer generation or Gen Xers. It's like, I didn't grow up doing the Pollyanna positive, warm, fuzzy thing. That's not who I am. That's not my style, is what someone could say. And I think so often leaders do say. I love to challenge that sort of narrative and ask people this question. If you knew that someone you cared about or loved was living their last day on planet Earth, or maybe you just knew you got a window into the world and all of a sudden you found out they're actually dealing with their most difficult day. They are having their worst day of their life. And you found out, you got a window, you got a special window into their world. And you had that information. Do you think you'd find a way to encourage them? Well, it's a rhetorical question. The answer is yes, of course. Somebody will say, well, yeah, if I knew that, of course I could do that. Okay, then it's proof that it's not as much about a style as it is a choice. This is a choice.
Yeah.
We got to make a daily choice. And we have to do it over and over and over again so people know. And people feel it. People need to be reminded more than they need to be instructed. We don't get to do this once a year, once a quarter, or once a week. This has to be an all the time, over and over and over kind of thing. It has to be done authentically, but it is a choice, not just a style. And I think we have to address that, Ken. As leaders, your people need to be encouraged way more than you think they do. You should encourage people way more than you think you should, and then double it.
Well, this is a muscle. I mean, this is, and again, I love what you're saying here. I love this. I think this is absolutely right. It has to be intentional, it has to be practiced on a daily basis, and then it can become habitual, but it still has to come from a place where you can actually give it. And I just keep coming back to this, Jordan. I just think there's so many leaders that are beat down and discouraged and struggling, and they just don't have it to give. And I love what you said earlier, and I'm coming back to it because if you are a middle manager, so if you're not the top leader, you're listening to this conversation right now, and you're not at the top, and you're not getting encouragement from your leaders, which, by the way, we know that the higher up the ladder we go, the less encouragement people get, and it becomes very, very lonely. You know this. You coach a lot of CEOs. Your organization specializes in top dogs. Yeah. So if we're not getting it above us, and you shared earlier how we can get encouragement and do some of it for ourselves. But then again, we've got to get outside of us. And you talked about being around certain people, but there are just some people who have the gift of it and they just do it a little bit better. And I just feel like if we were around those people, not only are we going to get something from them and receive that blessing of encouragement, but they model it so well. And you're one of those guys. I could send any young leader to hang out with you for 2 weeks. And if I said, just pay attention to how he says it, what he says, what his body language looks like, what his face looks like. I could say with confidence, because I've been around you, and you do it to me, you do it to everybody that you're around, you have figured this out. So speak to who modeled this for you. And how much of this was playing off of some natural personality traits maybe that you have, or how much of it was completely constructed?
Well, I do want to address the fact that we are all different.
Yeah,
So we just got done saying this is a choice, not a style. However, encouragement comes more natural to some people than it does to others, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of us are more expressive or more extroverted. I've always sort of been that way. So part of this is for me, Ken, who God made me to be in terms of expression and sort of my energy and my extroversion.
Yeah.
So I do want to acknowledge that. But I also have had some great mentors who encouraged me specifically in two areas or directions that were really meaningful to me. And if you want to be a memorable leader of people, I think we want to be a likable leader of people, but we don't necessarily care to be, or don't necessarily think about becoming a memorable leader of people. I want to be memorable. I don't just want to be likable. I want to be memorable. I want to be a person that creates a memory, that deposits something in someone that they don't forget. Okay. So if you want to do that for people, I would consider the art of character encouragement. That is to encourage the character of another person.
Yeah. The way you write this in the book, by the way, I got to give you a shout out. This is great. In the book, you write, focus on the who, not the do. And boy, that's powerful. Explain that, because you're on the path to that, but I wanted to shout that out to say that you really have grabbed that. I thought that was really fantastic. It stuck out to me.
Well, so let's just do it like this, right? I could say to Ken Coleman, hey, Ken, I could call you up. Man, so impressed with all the impact that you're having. You get the Ken Coleman show and you're doing all of this with Ramsey. And man, I just see your impact and the stuff you're posting on social media. And yet you're managing to, lead your family. And I just don't know how you do it. But man, congrats on all the impact. And by the way, there's probably 10 other things you're doing that I don't even know about. You're just knocking it out of the park. Okay, so that might mean something to you. I hope it would, right? And we live in a results-oriented world. And so results do matter. The do does matter.
Sure.
But what you're doing doesn't matter as much as who you are. And it also won't mean as much if I praise the do versus praising the who. You could write this down if you're taking notes. If you praise the do, a person might remember it. If you praise the who, they'll never forget it. So Ken, if I pulled you aside to say, Ken, I believe that you are one of the most intuitive people I've ever met, that I've ever spent time with. Your ability to read people, that's a God-given gift, that God gave you the gift of intuition, wisdom, discernment, intuition, your ability to read a room, to read another person, and then to speak truth and to speak life into them and over them. Brother, that is a gift that is unique to you. You have that gift on supernatural levels. I just want you to know that, remember that, see it. And I just love the way you've stewarded it, because it's allowed you to be one of the top hosts on planet Earth. In fact, I think it's that gift of intuition in Ken Coleman. It's who you are that's allowed you to do what you do. Lead this show, lead your family, lead in the community, lead in the world of business, lead on the stage. You have a supernatural level of intuition and discernment. Okay, so I won't put you on the spot, but for most of us, we know which type of conversation means more. And if you think back to the most encouraging conversations in your life, go back to your childhood when you were young, and a teacher or a mentor, a coach, maybe it was your parent. Somebody pulled you aside. They spoke something over you. They spoke something into you. My guess is it had very little to do with what you did, more to do with who you are.
That's absolutely right.
And I also think you probably don't even remember what they said. You just remember the way it made you feel. And it was because it had more to do with your character and less to do with your ability.
Well, I can go back to third grade. I can go back to a teacher by the name of Mr. Jarvis and some of the things he said. I certainly can remember, coaches, probably Coach Polk, my high school basketball coach. I mean, some of the most kind of poignant things that you're saying. You're absolutely right, speaking over people. But you're absolutely right. It marks people in a way that if you do it right and you do it very well, it's so very personal that it truly does the thing that you've written this entire book on, is encourage. It gives them courage to be themselves, to be the best that they can be, and that's the magic. And again, I'm going to keep coming back to this, folks, because I'm learning alongside of you. It's not just depositing belief, but it's transferring energy. And those two things that Jordan says that this does, well, it really does in that example. And I think you're absolutely right. And there's something special about that, the who. And so as a guy who coaches leaders, you have a leadership training company. How do you guys practically coach your clients on this particular point you just made? If they haven't done it, if you're kind of going, hey, because what I'm talking about here is I want our audience, because I think a lot of people listening and watching right now have never been this intentional about this. Like, this is a deep dive. This isn't, hey, how to do attaboys and attagirls. So how would you coach them? And I want our audience to come alongside of this coaching. I've not done this before. How do I begin to do this but make sure it's authentic?
Before we do it, we have to look for it. In other words, great. It's pretty hard to encourage someone for who they are if you really haven't spent time thinking about who they are.
That's it right there.
You know?
By the way, I'm cutting you off really quick because this is so good. I'm cutting you off because this is good. All right. So if that's so isn't that why we see this big deficit? Because this takes some legwork. Mm-hmm. This takes some legwork for leaders. You gotta ask some questions and pay attention and listen better to be able to do this. Is this true?
Yes. I think it requires more awareness, more attention, more work, more energy, more effort. Everybody can see the scorecard at work. Mm-hmm. We know who's getting a result, who hasn't got a result, who got promoted, who hasn't got promoted yet. That's obvious. We know that. So that doesn't take any work. Actually, if you're the leader on a Monday morning meeting or your leadership meeting, you just kind of sit at the table and encourage everybody for who got promoted and who had the biggest sale and who won the biggest deal. It's like, well, you're just like everybody else. Everybody knows that. You're just pointing out what's already obvious.
Yeah.
It takes more work and intentionality to really think about how your people are wired, who they were made to be, and what their unique gifts are. Now, here's where the rubber meets the road, Ken. A lot of leaders will say something like, directly or indirectly, but I have this group of people and they're not really productive. How do I begin to do that with a group of people who aren't very productive, or they're lackluster or whatever? Mm-hmm. Specifically, I had a leader recently who was talking about his internship team. He said, yeah, this group of interns is just rough. You know, they show up late and they leave early and we can't get them to move. You know, they're Gen Zers or whatever they're calling them. You know, they're just these young kids that don't get it. You know, how am I supposed to encourage those people? I said, John, you've got people on your team with unique levels of curiosity. I bet you have some people on your team, young people who are asking great questions. They're open-minded. They want to learn. And maybe they're showing up later, they're leaving earlier, they're not altogether organized, but neither was I at 21 years old. I bet you have a young person on your team who brings unique levels of levity and humor to the organization, who spices things up, who makes other people laugh. Like that's who they are. Mm-hmm. And again, if Zig was right, if Zig Ziglar said people need someone to believe in them before they'll believe in themselves, then true. If I can pull a young person aside and say, hey, listen, I just want to speak to you about your gift of curiosity. You have a curious mind. You ask some of the best questions. You're constantly trying to figure out how things work and why they work that way. That gift, my friend, will serve you so well in your life and in your business, leading your family, leading it, you know, and so that's it, right? And again, that takes intentionality, but it also requires us to look past somebody's shortcoming or their fault or their flaw. Yeah. So I really think, again, Ken, we don't look for it, therefore we don't do it.
That's
if you
so
want to do it, you got to look for it. And you have to be willing to look past who somebody isn't so that you can see who somebody is.
And I'm just, folks, I'm making a mental note. I'm passing it on to you folks. The who over the do, back to what Jordan shared just a few minutes ago, is really relevant to what he just said. Because if you got some people who aren't doing, you're going, well, dadgummit, how am I going to encourage people who aren't doing it? Jordan just laid it out. Find something in their who and watch them get fired up. Again, back to the data. 77% of employees would be more productive if they were recognized more frequently. So it's right there. Okay, heaviest piece of data that I've ever shared. In fact, it went viral on Instagram, over 10 million views. And I just literally shared something out of an article. I'm going to share it with you, and I want us to dive in on this because I think your entire book is essentially a manual to help address this. Here's the data. 69% of people said their managers had the greatest impact on their mental health, on par with the impact of their partner. And just to give you some quick comparison, 51% said their doctor had the greatest impact on their mental health, and 41% said their therapist, the very person they're paying. And so this is a stark reminder of the responsibility to encourage. You've written an entire book on this. Leaders need to feel this burden because this is real, yes?
It's real. You know, you and I are both people of faith, and so I'm not trying to preach at anyone listening, but I do think about the scriptures. Luke 12:48 says, to whom much has been given, much more will be required. To whom's been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. Yeah, it's a responsibility. In fact, it's a burden. I mean, you've got a responsibility. There's been a burden placed upon you. If you're a leader, you've got influence over someone else's life. It is your duty to help that person feel valued and seen and really understand their gifts and who God made them to be, which transcends anything about results, productivity, achievement, or progress in business. Now, not everyone sees it that way, Ken, but I think the best CEOs, the best managers, the best leaders take that responsibility seriously. And because of that, they have a greater level of impact. You know, there's a social psychologist, his name is Dr. David McClellan, worked at Harvard. He said 95% of our successes or failures in life are a direct result of the people we habitually associate with. Your job as a leader isn't just to do that for other people, it's also to get them around other people who can do that for them. So the question I'd have for our leaders, Ken, is like, as a leader, are you helping your people get around other leaders? Are you helping them foster an environment where they can be encouraged, not just by you, but by others? Have you built a culture? Do people walk into your organization and go, wow, like I met Ken and I met Dave and I met Sarah. I just meeting all these people. They all just understand the art of encouragement. They are positive. They're forward thinking. They're putting the proverbial 10 on my forehead. They're choosing to see what is and looking past what isn't so they can help me be a better version of myself.
Yeah. I want to know what you think about this. Encouragement is contagious. True or false?
True.
Why?
True. I think more is caught than taught. You know, I mean, you've encouraged me, Ken, John Maxwell. I mean, we could just go down the list of leaders who have really encouraged me. I've actually been encouraged watching them encourage others. Here's why. More is caught than taught. You know, so if you want to teach other people how to encourage other people, go encourage other people. Your people are watching. You know, and so give them something to watch. And you know, I think we got to give people more credit. They're paying attention. Your culture, your organization, if you're a leader listening, you got people watching. And they're watching how you treat people, especially those who can't do anything for you. So how do you treat them? I think it is contagious. I think more is caught than taught. And I think when people watch an encouraging person encourage other people, they're more prone to go encourage.
We see this in sports a lot, and this is a fun way to talk about it because you have a very tight-knit group of people in a locker room, despite the sport, right? You know, even football is your largest team sport, and you're talking about 53 people on the NFL level, 90 on the college level. But you've got a limited amount of people in this tribe, if you will, this group. And you've seen it. You've worked with the Iowa Hawkeyes closely in the basketball program. I'm sure football as well. There's something about a team, and again, I've read it, I've seen it. They talk about it after the season is over where we just hear things like they were for each other. There was a lot of unity here. And when you hear things like that, Jordan, I think that is a result of an encouraging team. Where it started, how it's being manifested, it could be different. But when you hear things like this team was unified, that's a team where I think you could see encouragement all over the place. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that. I think a connected team is a committed team.
Yeah.
John Gordon said, a connected team is a committed team. We're fortunate to work with a lot of connected teams, committed athletes who are helping to connect, great teams. I'll give you an example. Trey Smith is a guy that we coach and worked with for the past year and a half. I was at a game this past year in Kansas City, and they lost in just heartbreaking fashion. If you're a Chiefs fan or you're an NFL fan, you might even remember the play. Travis Kelce throws this crazy pass across the field, backwards lateral pass. Chiefs score in a game should have been a game-winning touchdown. Gets called back because of an offsides penalty. I meet with Trey right after the game. I mean, that was one of the final plays of the, in the fourth quarter.
And he's a lineman for the Chiefs, right?
Plays right guard for the Chiefs. Yeah. Yep. Just had a great season, 2-time Super Bowl champion in 3 years. So I meet with Trey right after the game, and we're in the family room, with some of the close friends and family talking to players. And, everybody wants to know, well, what was the temperature like in the locker room? And Trey was kind of like, it's all good. Now he's disappointed. I don't want to minimize disappointment, right? He's still a competitive guy, and it's all good. And what I noticed Trey do, Ken, is he walked around the players' room and he was just complimenting each person for one thing they did well. Hey, you did this, you did that. A great game. I saw you do this. Trey was looking for the good in other people, looking past what isn't to see what is, to help his team stay connected. And then, kind of walk through Arrowhead Stadium and through the back hallways and so forth, and just paying attention to all of the many people in the hallways, the Chiefs personnel. I mean, literally people cleaning the hallways, the service people. Trey's calling them by name. He's not just connecting the team, he's connecting the organization in light of difficult circumstance and a somber environment, still choosing to see the good. And so, yeah, I think, a connected team is a committed team, but it's easy to stay connected when you're winning and things are going well. The question is, can you stay connected when the chips are down? Obviously, we know the Chiefs go on to beat the Bills in the playoffs and win, another Super Bowl. And I think so much of that is their choice to stay committed through difficult circumstances.
Okay, I want to drop this down to maybe the prospective leader, just the professional that wants to win. 38% of employees say that they recognize coworkers daily. I'm honestly, Jordan, a little bit surprised the number's that high. I would have probably, if you'd have put that to me, I would have said something in the teens. Hopefully I'm not too cynical. But here we stand. What happens to a person? Describe in your feelings, what happens when we encourage a coworker? So now we're not in a leadership position. This is a coworker. Maybe we're on the same rung of the ladder. What's in it for us? Is there something that happens when we genuinely encourage someone that comes back to us that we experience? I have some thoughts on this, but I want to know what happens.
Well, first off, I don't know where the data came from or what study that number is a part of, but I would, just by my own personal observation, we've committed to this work and this topic specifically, Ken, for the last 5 years in a pretty deep and intentional way. Observing a lot of teams and high-level leaders, I would submit that number is way too high. Yeah. And again, I think that gets back to people overestimate their ability to recognize. I'd also ask the question, what are they recognizing? Like, again, are they recognizing a win or a big day or a big week?
By the way, because I want to give the audience this is from Nectar. They've done some stuff with SHRM, Society of Human Resource Managers. So again, it's a very good point. You're making a very good point here on what does that actually mean? Because I agree. I think that number seems high the way it's described.
Yeah, you recognize somebody for what they do, they'll give you their time. I think if you recognize somebody for who they are, they'll give you their heart. Yeah, they'll go above and beyond. They're willing to sacrifice for a mission, right? It's like, this is a crusade. This is a mission. This is important to me. When somebody feels like you're on their side, you're choosing them, you buy into them. I just think you get more out of a person. I think retention goes up. Yeah. I think you're a more attractive, purposeful leader. And I wish I had data right now to support that, Ken. But we've just seen it over and over and over again. And we've all had this experience, right? Like when somebody believes in you, chooses you, looks past what isn't to see what is, you're just more willing to follow that leader.
And again, I want to stay in the context too right now of the coworker. So you're not in a leadership position. Why should I encourage my coworkers? First, Jordan, I just think that it's like giving a gift. I don't think it's any different than if I ever show up and I gave you a gift, and we get to a certain maturity in our lives where we're not kids anymore. And now I'm a parent. You're a dad. You got what, 3 kids or 4 kids? I can't.
You got 4 now.
You got 4. And I got 3. Sheesh, I couldn't do 4. I don't know how you're doing it. But the point is at this stage of my life, and you understand this, we get more excited on Christmas morning about our kids opening their gifts. And I think this idea of giving encouragement is going to have the same emotion when you go, oh, I'm genuinely encouraging a teammate. Not to get something back, but we actually do get something back. We actually really get, there'd be a real dopamine hit if we're going to talk chemicals. If we begin to build trust because they go, wow, that there was nothing in it for Jordan. He just gave me some love, showed me some love in front of everybody, or it could be private. But I think that in a world where, and again, you're in the front lines here of coaching leaders, there's so much dissension and toxicity, gossip, backbiting, jockeying for position. What would you coach somebody to do if you were going to say, all right, here's what I want you to do over the next week or 30 days. I'm giving you a fun what-if scenario because I want you to do what you do best. Coach our audience how they could win through the art of encouragement with their coworkers and what you think will happen for them and to them if they do this genuinely.
In the book, we talk about the art of elevating encouragement. It's one of the chapters in the book. Before I discuss that chapter and we get practical, let me just say this, because I think we've all had this experience, Ken, where we're sort of neutral on someone. Maybe we know them, maybe we don't. We're sort of neutral. Or maybe it's even someone that you don't really care for. Maybe you had a poor experience with this person.
Ooh, this is good.
And you get on social media and you have a notification. And so you check the notification. And it's from this person that you're sort of neutral on. Or maybe you don't even really care for. And they commented on a picture of your family. And it says, very simply, beautiful picture of your family. And in a moment, subconsciously, we think, kind of like that guy. And he's a good guy. It happens in a matter of seconds, right? It's a subconscious thing. I'm not even saying that we're slowing down to process that. But to your point, Ken, there's a dopamine hit. There's an endorphin release tied to that person's name, creates a positive impression. And I go, I actually like that guy. All he did or all she did, the person who dropped the comment, is spent 3 seconds and typed a little sentence. Great family picture. Or maybe it was, hey, great win, or nice to see you, or love your post, or maybe it's not even a word. It's a symbol. There's an emoji. It's a smiley face. And it actually alters and changes the way we view a person. So, okay, if all of this is true, let's back to elevating encouragement. Here's some simple things that you could do to elevate your coworkers. Okay, let's go macro, micro.
Love it.
Micro. When you have the proverbial microphone, when it's your turn to speak in a meeting, Monday morning meeting, leadership meeting, rookie meeting, I don't know, just there's a team setting. Make it your mission to publicly acknowledge and recognize other people. Here's the best part. It doesn't even need to make sense in the context of the meeting. It's never the wrong time to encourage someone. I want you to hear that. It's never the wrong time to encourage someone. I was a part of a board meeting the other day, Ken, and this guy gets up and just recognizes the person facilitating the meeting. He says, Tara, you just are so great at organizing and putting details together. And I don't know if this has been said yet. I just want to say thank you for all the work that you do behind the scenes to make these meetings effective and efficient. Thank you, Tara, for all that you do. And Tara's like, you could tell he just really meant something. So be the person that just shouts people out. Hey, I just wanted to pay attention to this person who's going above and beyond. I just wanted to pay attention to this person who's serving. I just wanted to pay attention to this person who showed up early. Make it your mission to shout people out. Okay, let's go macro. This would be really good, I think, Ken, for the people who specifically are in the service business. Let's say you've got customers or clients. You could also do this with colleagues. Okay, make a social media post about someone. It doesn't need to be fancy, just a picture of them or something, they did or achieved, or it might just be, hey, this person's serving at a really high level. Just wanted to give them some praise. Hey, if you love this person too, why don't you drop something in the comments? If you've got a client that runs a business, or they're in the service business, or a real estate agent, attorney, accountant, financial advisor, drop them a review, little Google review. They got a podcast, this show, drop Ken a review. Hey, thanks for all you do, Ken. Love listening to your show. I bet it would mean something to Ken. Now, Ken's got a lot of those reviews, but it would mean something.
Right.
If you have somebody you think should be nominated for an award, business person of the year, businesswoman, businessman of the year in your backyard, 40 under 40, restaurant of the year, nominate them for the award. Click the endorse button on LinkedIn. 95% of LinkedIn users have their LinkedIn account connected to their business email, which they check all day, every day. You want to drop into their email inbox, leave a positive impression, endorphin release attached to your name, endorse them on LinkedIn for a skill. The point is, there are an endless amount of opportunities that take no wisdom, no experience, just a little bit of time, effort, and energy, and you can make a big splash in elevating the people around you. So we could jam on that for a long time, Ken, but there's a few
I love
ideas.
that. It's very, very helpful. Okay, I want to get to your heart of a coach. I need you to coach some people, because I think that maybe some people have tried this, some people are going to try this, and let's call it out here that this is a wonderful book. I want everybody to get it. It's very practical. By the way, I'm not trying to make this about the book, but there's so much good in it. Every chapter has very specific things you can do, so I really encourage you to do it. But let's talk about the real world. You start doing this stuff, Jordan, that you're talking about and you wrote about, you're going to meet some resistance. You just are. You're going to meet some people who call you into question. They challenge your authenticity. Maybe they call you the butt kisser, far, far worse. Who knows? Maybe they're cynical about it. I want you to coach our audience through this. They're going to meet that resistance. What would you say to them?
You will and you should meet resistance if you are doing anything that matters in life, including encouraging people. Mm-hmm. As much as we don't want to believe this, Ken, there is somebody listening to this show at this very moment that doesn't love this show. And to that person, I'd say, well, why are you listening?
Yeah.
I don't know why, but there's probably somebody listening. It's like, I don't even, Ken Coleman and Jordan, what are these guys even talking about? This is just silly, warm, fuzzy conversation. Right. Okay, but check this out. What if someone on your team, Ken, right now, middle of this show, walks up and they just whisper in your ear, hey, Ken, just time out for a second. Got to tell you something. And you're like, okay, Jordan, pause. Let's pause the conversation. Mm-hmm. Hold on 1 second. Pause. There's something I need to hear. And there's a security person on your team. And they whisper in your ear. They say, Ken, did you know there's a person outside the studio, right outside the building here? And they're holding a sign. And it's got your name on it. And it says, I don't like the Ken Coleman show. Mm-hmm. And then imagine you hear that from the security person. Sure. And you go, man, no kidding. And so you close the laptop and you take, you remove the microphone. Hey, Jordan, we got to cancel this today. We need to stop this. There's somebody out there that doesn't like the show. Okay. That would never happen. Mm-hmm. That would never happen. Right. You would not sacrifice the many people who are listening because there's one person outside the studio who doesn't like the show. And the same way, a musician would not stop the show and sacrifice all the fans who are enjoying the music because there's one person outside the arena that says they don't like it. So the question is not, will it happen? It will happen. The question is, what are you going to do when it does? Are you going to pay attention to the people who are listening to the music? Or are you going to pay attention to the person outside the arena? Mm-hmm. Keep playing your music for the people who are listening. And I think this, Ken, when we stop playing the music, it's our own ego that's getting in the way. Mm. I had somebody say this to me when I was really young in a sales business. I was struggling to make certain types of sales calls. This person says, hey, what's going on with that? Why are you struggling? You're not meeting your numbers daily. Why are you struggling to make the sales calls? I said, I think it's because of my own insecurity. I'm just a little bit insecure. She said, can I help you with that? I said, sure. She said, yeah, I don't sense it's your insecurity. I sense it's your ego. You get an ego problem. I said, ego problem? Tell me more. She said, yeah, the fact that you think people are sitting around talking about you after the sales call is a sign of an overinflated ego.
Yeah. Wow.
You're not that important.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody cares. They've moved past it.
Yeah.
So will you get some feedback? Will you get some resistance from encouraging other people? Sure.
Yeah.
I would just challenge you to think about what's your next step when that happens. The world needs encouragement, desperately needs encouragement. Ken just pointed out a ton of data. We wrote a book about it. Desperately needs you to encourage. But just like any other leader who's ever done anything, you're going to get some heat for it. And then I think you got to ask yourself, is this my ego that's listening to, this type of feedback? Or, what's really going on there? Step into it. Expect it. Ken, I know you and I both faced some criticism, and I'll continue to get that. There's somebody criticizing this show right now as they listen to it. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
We're going to keep talking.
Yeah, it's just part of the territory when you do what you and I do, and I get it, and I stay out of the comments, and it makes life really enjoyable. To wrap our conversation, I want to for both of us to kind of reflect, and I'll just start. I think of all the successful people I've read about. I've read hundreds of biographies at this point in my life because I'm a nerd. And I could think of story after story after story after story. I can think of my own journey. I could think of people that I look up to that are giants, and you just don't ever accomplish anything of note without key inflection points in your life when somebody just dropped a word of encouragement on you. I mean, it's just, you can't cancel that thought out. That you have to acknowledge that a moment of encouragement, Jordan, could literally change the trajectory of somebody's life. And this is not about leadership only. This is not about power. This really is an art form. And I love the cover of the book because it looks like a painting, and you see a heart there. I want to give it to you. That's my observation. Take that. What do you think about that? And then in your own life, is there a moment? So it's a two-parter. The second part, give you the final word. A moment that sticks out to you where somebody drops some encouragement on you, and you can look back at it and say, this literally changed my trajectory.
Yeah, we'll have some fun with this one. This is real. The date is November 4th, 2023. So not that long ago.
No.
We're in Dallas, Texas. I'm an MC at an event with two other leaders. I'm kind of playing a small role. And there's a little bit of crowd interaction. There's some other thought leaders that were invited to be sort of, hosts, content creators, producers, etc. And, and so we're just having fun with the crowd, and it's a large group of people. There's a lot of high level thought leaders in the room. And somebody says from the back of the room, middle of the event, somebody says from the back of the room, hey, I just wanted to make a mention of the great job that Jordan Montgomery's doing and how he's leading us today, and just shared some really endearing, thoughtful words about my leadership. I mean, I was just an MC. I'm just this really small fish. I wasn't even supposed to really be any part of the event. I'm just there to kind of help facilitate.
I think I know what you're doing here. My memory's a little weak, but I think I know what you're doing here. I think I just figured this out.
And that friend was you, Ken. It was you.
Yeah.
You just, from the back of the room, you decided to make a moment count for me.
Well, and let me explain this here, because I don't want this to be about me, but you had been encouraging people all day long and calling people out in the room. It was a very intimate group of people, and there was at some point, I think you asked me to say something around the content that was being delivered. It was great. And I just remember going, you've been so amazing throughout the day. I was watching you do it for everybody else, and I went, hey, you know what? While I'm at it here, And you're being very kind. I don't think that changed the trajectory of your life, but I appreciate the shout out. But I also want to say that the reason I did it is because I felt like you needed to be recognized. It wasn't that I was, doing some great act and bestowing something on you. It's just that you had been doing it for somebody else. And I guess this is a greater point here that you've helped me make. When you see someone else encouraging everybody else, you go, that's fun. And I need to do that. And then you go, well, I want to encourage them. It's kind of like the old adage. I always tell young people, Jordan, when they come to me, say they ask for success tips, and I'll say, always walk into new rooms, influential rooms, with a question. Lead with a question. Because the more interested you are, the more interesting you become. In other words, if I get to meet you for the first time, I need to ask a lot of questions about you. Because I want to learn about you. But also, here's what happens. Most healthy people return that. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to be interesting and memorable, start with being interested in everybody else. Zig Ziglar, law of reciprocity here. But you tried to flip it on me, but back to you. I appreciate you're very kind.
But let me say this. It underscores a point, though. It underscores a point. For you, Ken, that was just a small moment. For me, it was a really big moment.
Okay.
And I think that's all too often what happens, right? Is as leaders, as people, you make a small comment and you're like, oh, that was just a small little moment. It was just a little something small I said. It wasn't that big of a deal. And so for you, it's this little tiny thing. There's really nothing happening. But on the other side of that, oftentimes it's a really big thing and everything is happening. So I go home and back to my wife. And by the way, my wife doesn't really ask much about the events. I mean, it's just work, right? I go to work and she goes to work. And,
right.
But hey, how was Dallas? And, that's one of the first things I brought up. There's this really cool moment. And Ken Coleman was so generous and thoughtful. And so the point is this, if you're listening, you got to make these little moments count for other people. And you're never going to know when it's a big, or maybe sometimes you will, maybe sometimes you get on a show and somebody, shout, but oftentimes you don't know. You just don't have the benefit of knowing.
Yeah.
But you can trust that if you do that enough, you're creating some really meaningful, memorable moments for other people. And remember, we're always one moment away from a completely different life.
That's right. Oh, listen,
so
I've got
the person who creates moments.
Yeah, and I'm just going to share this as an example for our audience. But I had the opportunity, Jordan, 2 weeks ago to interview Coach K from Duke. It was 20 years to the month that I got to interview him the first time, and it was an accident. I was the backup plan, and it was for John Maxwell simulcast. And so, to cut the story short for the audience, that day that we did that, this was back in the day, Jordan. We had to change tapes because you ran out of tapes. It was so long ago, 20 years ago. You don't even know what that's like. Yeah. And Coach had a moment with me where he leaned forward and he patted me on the knee and he said some really great stuff. I'm not going to share it all for time, and it doesn't matter. But he encouraged me. And I mean, transfer of belief like nobody's business. First interview I'd ever done. And so on that stage in Dallas 2 weeks ago in front of several thousand leaders, I had the opportunity to share that story with him. And I looked at him and I said, I, in large part, am standing on this stage today with you because you encouraged me. I mean, I was probably 30, 31. And when Coach K gives you a compliment and looks at you the way that man looks at you, because when he looks at you, he looks through you. And so I was able to share that with him on the stage, but it was really powerful and humbling for me to be able to say thank you to him in person. And I just share that story because that is, in fact, the art of encouragement. There's a guy who's coached many, many wins, many championships, many great players, and yet he's with this young punk doing this interview, and he decides to say something kind to me that went right into my soul, Jordan. Into my soul. And that began a journey that was scary as you know what, but I probably drew back on that compliment that he gave me, very specific compliment. And I drew on that. It was in my bio for a decade, the compliment that he gave me. So I just share that story because I want you all to understand Jordan is on to something and you do it well. I want to give you the last word We got a lot of people listening and watching here that are pros. They're professionals, and they want to make a difference in this life. They really do. It's the only reason you're listening to this show. There ain't any other reason. But they're a little down. Maybe they've been waiting, Jordan, for a while for this thing to happen, and it's not happening. Maybe they've been passed up. Maybe they were fired recently. I love the story in your book, the very opening story. Folks, you got to read it. I'll tease it and just leave it there. It's a great story of a valley moment. They've been in a valley, Jordan, and I just feel it's appropriate for me to turn it over to you, the last word, and encourage people that are in a valley.
Yeah, well, I'll just maybe leave our listeners with the really short version of that story in the first chapter of the book. I was 27 years old. And I was in sort of a penthouse season of my life, or so I thought. Business is going really well. I was working for this Fortune 100 financial firm, and I'm flying all over the country, and things are, they're going well. By worldly standards, they're going really well. I'm making a bunch of money. I'm getting promoted over and over and over again. And I'm sort of on the fast track to having this really big professional life that I so much wanted. And I got a call from my supervisor, Ken, and he said, I need to meet with you like right away. And I'm naive, right? So I say, hey, I'm busy. I got things going on. So we'll have to do it some other day. And he said, this is the kind of meeting that you move your calendar for. So I thought, geez, well, somebody on my team must have made a mistake. And so a couple hours later, I show up at the office. Remember, I'm naive, and so I don't know what's coming. He says, Jordan, you haven't been malicious or intentional, but you've been careless and casual. And when you're casual, you create casualties. Today is your last day at our firm. And the reality is I was leading through charisma, but I wasn't really leading through character. And I was overexposed and I was underdeveloped. My character wasn't keeping pace with my influence. And so I don't think God caused it, but I think he sort of allowed it. And overnight, I go from the penthouse to the outhouse. I get let go of this firm. A person on my team took a test. I didn't acknowledge it, didn't report it. I just wasn't dotting the I's, crossing the T's. No major infraction. I was running so hard in the direction of all these things that didn't matter. And so I just got crushed when this was taken away from me. My identity was in this thing that ultimately was no more. And so, I was involved in some real estate deals. They go sideways because of my status with employment. It was just awful. And I entered into this valley season. What I learned, and what I would say, Ken, to the person listening who's in a valley season, maybe you just lost a relationship, or you just lost your job, or for some reason you're feeling discouraged right now. I think God does his best work in the valley, because that is where you're most open to learning and receiving and rebuilding. And so take at least a little bit of pride in that. A season of more is almost always preceded by a season of less. I had a friend tell me, hey, I know it's dark, but you haven't been buried. You've been planted, and God's going to do something really good in your life. Just wait. You wait. And then I had another friend say on the day after I got fired, his name is Adam Korpstein. I give him a shout out, picks me up at my house. We go for a drive around the block. He says, Jordan, maybe one day you'll write a book about this. Well, it just came true. We wrote a book about it.
That's right.
And God's just used every ounce of my pain for good. Ken, we got to start this consulting business because of the pain that I went through. God redirected my path. I met my wife because of the pain. I have 4 children because of the pain.
Yeah.
We have this conversation because of the pain. Sometimes God's preparation for your life is packaged as pain. I don't know where today finds you. Might be dark. You're not buried. You're planted. God can make beautiful things out of rough situations. And so rest in that and take it one day at a time. Reach out. If I can be of help or service, send me a DM, send us an email. I'll try to get back to as many of those as I can. But I've been through some stuff in my life. I've been discouraged. Oftentimes a season of less precedes a season of more. Take heart.
Yeah.
And look forward to hearing from some of you who are listening to the podcast.
I love it. By the way, folks, the book is The Art of Encouragement, How to Lead Teams, Spread Love, and Serve from the Heart. This guy's the real deal, folks. He just is. And I can tell you that from experience. Jordan, how to encourage the encourager. I'm just telling you, you're doing exactly what you were put on this planet to do. There's no question in my mind, and you're going to impact a lot of people with this. You're already doing some incredible stuff at such a young age. Really great wisdom beyond your years. And truly, as one of the great football coaches of all time has famously said, his name is Jim Harbaugh, said, attack each day with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind, and you do that. But I think if I were to pull enthusiasm out, it would be encouragement. You really are a guy who models the way, and I think that's the best kind of leadership, someone that we see do it in and out of rooms, behind the scenes. I've seen it, and you've seen him turn it on me today a couple times with some sneaky encouragement. He's that good, folks. Jordan, thank you, my friend. I appreciate you, and best of fortunes on this book and your greater work.
Brother, God bless you. I meant it when I said you're truly one of the best interviewers on the planet. And so to be interviewed by one of the best and to be on your show is a privilege and a blessing. And I just can't thank you enough for your friendship and the ways that you've encouraged me over the years. So thanks, Ken, for having me.
Appreciate you, brother. Big thanks to Jordan Montgomery. I know you're better for it, and I am too. Remember, if you're enjoying these conversations, give us a like, a 5-star review, and a share, and we'll be back with you before you know it.